Prediction has become one of the most common translation words around AI, a word which seems to tell us not just what technical tools can do, but what kind of impact that could have on society. It seems to say feed enough data and computational power, and just about every human phenomenon can be nailed down and made into an object of calculative control. Here I want to make a simple argument that says maybe data-driven prediction is not primarily a problem of knowing the future. It's also not about making human and social phenomena more transparent and orderly, at least not for everybody. Rather, prediction is primarily a means for extracting and concentrating discretionary power. And by discretion, I simply mean the everyday decisions we make about what kind of situation am I in. So even before the question of does my face look happy or sad or disgusted, before that, it is about asking how has my face been placed into a situation where it is being assessed for emotional state, or it is being assessed for indicators of cheating in an exam, or for suitability for hiring. And it is the deprivation of this discretionary power, this ability to define the situation, that I would argue is the primary impact of predictive technologies, especially in the form that they tend to be deployed in today. Now, to extract from one is to concentrate in another. And in the paper, I argue that making human behavior more predictable for the client of prediction often means making it more unpredictable for the target. This argument requires addressing a couple of questions. The first being, how should we think about prediction? How should we define it and work with it in order to grasp this process of extraction? And second, what kind of extraction of discretion is happening? Who is profiting and who is being deprived? The first part we can think through in a kind of a contrast between small and big prediction. On one hand, you have the plethora of individual predictive claims, the idea that you can predict sexuality using face images, or that you can measure eye movements to detect cheating, so on and so forth. The specific claims come and go. They might involve relatively cutting edge technologies, they may not. And some of them might not be as predictive as the name implies. But the overall flow of small predictions, in this sense, the individual predictive claims, add up to what we could shorthand as big prediction, prediction with a big P, of general sense of historical progress, or at least technical trend, which lends these different claims an air of plausibility or even inevitability beyond the specific evidence at hand. For the simplest example, we might think of Clearview AI and the controversy around it over the last couple of years. There was a moment when an early investor gets asked, hey, isn't this technology kind of harmful? Isn't it kind of dangerous? And they have a reply, which is a nice little specimen of late capitalist eschatology, right? The investor says, hey, listen, nobody can stop it. It's happening, so we might as well make a buck of it. Who knows why they think information is fated to expand forever? Who knows why they think it's impossible to ban such technology? The point is that such expectations and beliefs become part of the ground that we stand on. The full paper works through this by talking about prediction as a relational grammar, a habitual way of thinking, and talking about how facts are made, what kinds of data tend to appear in predictive systems, and what other kinds of data tend to get forgotten. The paper looks at patterns of data production around crime and policing applications to show how predictive systems tend to entrench existing differences, existing asymmetries between what kind of reality tends to get measured and represented as data, and what kind of reality tends to get filed as anecdotal or ambiguous or unmeasurable. But how is it that this kind of grammar of prediction advances a widespread concentration of discretionary power? What does this actually look like? Well, for that, we can turn to a place where the technological extraction of discretion supports the extraction of labor power which is a relationship that, of course, echoes well over a century of practices around automation. And so we can look at one of the most central examples, the Amazon warehouse. Amazon, of course, is the fifth largest employer in the world, and many researchers have already documented its many-pronged attack on worker rights and worker agency. But here I want to focus specifically on the point that there's a synergy between the intense data-driven automation of labor on one hand and the systematic deprivation of information for the worker on the other hand, that these two things go hand in hand. Consider the rate. The rate is the basic metric that drives predictability on Amazon's side. It is simply the number of items that you're expected to handle per hour when you work at the warehouse. The rate is regularly cited as justification for Amazon's rate of firings, which are abnormally high relative to the industry average. But importantly, the worker is denied clear information about their own rate. So, for example, the sociologist Nantina Gonzalez says when they were working at an Amazon warehouse, they were initially trained for 400 picks per hour. And then the human trainer comes along later on and says, hey, actually, don't worry about it so much. Our real expectation is around 360. And, as a worker, you have no way of knowing which is true or if any of them is consistently true at all. And you see in this example on the slide from Easter Sunday at a different warehouse saying anyone picking over a 310 rate will be rewarded. So there's an information asymmetry, and it's an asymmetry that allows the manager to wield the rate not so much as an objective standard, but more as a flexible stick for every occasion. The consequence of this is that, as far as the worker is concerned, their own work and life becomes less predictable, and less discretionary. Um, we find these kinds of stories elsewhere from journalists that like McGillis's account. They talk about talking to they describe talking to a warehouse worker who basically says, "Listen, the problem that I have is that I can't exercise basic control or basic expectation even over a single box. Because the items come to you from a dynamic assignment through algorithmic systems, you're looking at a box in front of you, you're about to pick it up, and you cannot expect how heavy it's going to be or what kind of maneuver you must make with your body to lift it safely. So even at this basic physical level, discretion is being taken away in a trade-off. This kind of unpredictability, in all likelihood, contributes to Amazon's industry high levels of physical injury. And that, of course, poses its own prediction problem for management. And so, in his final letter to to shareholders as Amazon CEO, Jeff Bezos offers a solution that doubles down on the asymmetry of prediction. Right? Bezos says, "Listen, instead of returning some level of worker discretion, why don't we make the process more finely controlled, and of course more opaque to the workers, by rotating employees across jobs that use different muscle tendon groups?" There's a remarkable continuity here between what Amazon does today and the past century and more of automation processes as chronicled by folks like David Noble and Harry Braverman. You have here with Bezos the algorithmic subdivision of muscle tendon groups. Or in the image that you see here, examples like how Amazon are experimenting with smart wristbands that might tell workers where to go at a very minute, very subdivided, fragmented way, second by second. And all of this is almost a historical homage to Frank Gilbrett's motion studies, which was happening in the 1910s and 20s, and it was trying to extend Taylor's time studies by standardizing factory workers' every movement into fractions of seconds. So this is a type of knowledge creation that systematically divorces knowing from doing in order to depreciate the judgment of the doer. There's a pattern here, of course, throughout all of this. The pattern here is that the clients of prediction, the people who pay for predictive systems, who decide how they're deployed, they often remain much the same groups of people. It's the border officials, it's the police department, it's the corporate employer. Their definitions of the predictive problem, their interests, their interests tend to be reflected in these systems. The target of prediction also tends to remain the same. And the predictive systems are often predicated on the assumption that these people are suspicious, that they are dangerous, that they are lazy, and that their exercise of discretionary power must be a threat. So in March 2021, for example, Amazon begins pushing its own delivery drivers to sign away their biometric consent. And what they do with this biometric consent is to introduce a new suite of surveillance tools, including what they claim is an AI-driven detection system for identifying risky driving behaviors. And so this is another set of measures in which a lot of this minute, everyday bodily discretion that you have over what kind of situation are you in and what kind of decision making system must you engage, that discretion is directly being taken away in a trade-off for making the process appear more predictable to the manager's side. So I'll stop there for now, but the paper remains a work in progress, though some of the themes are also discussed in my book, Technologies of Speculation, with NYU Press. So please feel free to send any comments, suggestions, questions, criticisms my way over by email or Twitter. Thank you so much.